Good morning. Welcome to work session for November.
No.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, it's morning, isn't it? Welcome to the regular city council meeting for Tuesday, November 12th, 2019, and we'll begin with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And roll call, please.
Dave Bowman,
Present.
Barbara Bynum,
Present.
Roy Anderson,
Present.
Judy Ann Files,
Present.
Doug Glassbell.
Present.
All city councilors are present.
Great. Any changes to the agenda? Additions, deletions?
No, there are none.
Great. Okay, we've got several proclamations. We're going to sort of change the order in which we read them, and we're going to do Hospice and Palliative Care Month first. Hospice and Palliative Care Month, November 2019. Whereas for more than 25 years, Hope West has been Montrose's community-owned nonprofit organization where people turn when facing life's most difficult times. And whereas, as a nationally recognized hospice, palliative care, and adult bereavement and children's bereavement program, Hope West provides care to more than 2,000 individuals each year. With every year, the need for Hope West services is growing, and whereas every citizen can play a role in helping your neighbors by supporting the mission of Hope West through volunteer service and gifts, and whereas this public declaration celebrates our community's unique spirit of helping each and every day and honors the compassion of many nursing assistants, social workers, chaplains, physicians, counselors, registered nurses, and volunteers at Hope West, and whereas Hope West and Palliative Care Month presents a unique opportunity to increase the awareness of these programs and honor all who make them possible. Now, therefore, I, Dave Bowman, and the City Council of the City of Montrose, Colorado, do hereby proclaim November 2019 as Hospice and Palliative Care Month in the City of Montrose, and encourage the support and participation of friends, neighbors, colleagues, and fellow citizens in hospice activities and programs now and throughout the year. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause to be affixed the official seal of the City of Montrose this 12th day of November 2019. And I believe there's some folks from Hope West that would like to speak. If you guys would, cool. Let's bring everybody up and get a picture, and then.
Thank you. I'll be very brief here. On behalf of my colleagues present with me today and the Hope West organization, we thank you for this proclamation and recognizing this valuable service in our community. Nonprofit organizations in 1990 provided 95% of the hospice care in the United States. By comparison, for-profit companies represent over 70% in today's market, while nonprofits have dropped to about 27%. So it is our honor and privilege to serve this community as a nonprofit. I've asked one of our people who have benefited from our services to speak briefly about her experience with Hope West. So Kathy DeVore.
It's difficult to put in just a few words what hospice has meant to my family. I've had the privilege of 3 family members receiving Hope West hospice services in the last 6 years. My father-in-law, my mother, and recently my husband, Dennis DeVore. My family valued the cohesive, holistic team who took care of each of our loved ones. I never felt alone and appreciated the hospice team that helped us with decisions about each new level of care that was needed. They provided guidance with difficult conversations. As my daughter Laura DeVore said, they were like angels who, by listening, and sometimes without saying anything, knew what we needed, when we needed it, and provided care and support with grace and dignity for our dying loved ones and the surrounding family members. Following my husband's death, I'm not sure how I would have handled all the overwhelming grief without the help of Hope West Hospice bereavement classes. I am just very thankful for all the doctors, CNAs, nurses, social workers, chaplains, and volunteers who helped us through all those difficult months. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Small Business Saturday. Proclamation, Small Business Saturday, November 30, 2019. The City of Montrose celebrates our local small business and contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 30.7 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all firms with paid employees in the United States and are responsible for 64.9% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2018. And whereas small businesses employ 47.3% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and whereas 94% of the consumers in the United States value the contribution small businesses make in their communities, and whereas 96% of consumers who plan to shop on Small Business Saturday said the day inspires them to go to small, independently owned retailers or restaurants that they've not been to before or would not have otherwise tried. And whereas 92% of the companies planning promotions on Small Business Saturday said the day helps their business stand out during busy holiday shopping season, and whereas 59% of small business owners said Small Business Saturday contributes significantly to their holiday sales each year, and whereas Montrose, Colorado supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas Montrose, Colorado supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, I, Dave Bowman, and the City Council of the City of Montrose, Colorado, do by proclaim November 30, 2019 as Small Business Saturday in the City of Montrose and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the official seal of the City of Montrose this 12th day of November 2019. And I'd like to invite all the small business men and women that are in the audience. I see tons of them. If you'll all come up here and receive the proclamation, we'll get a picture together. So come on, Fletch, lead them up here. And I just want to point out Fletcher Flower from Flower Motor just received a big award from Time to being one of the best car guys in the nation. Is that adequate? Time Dealer of the Year. And we have one more, American Indian Heritage Month, November 2019. Whereas the original inhabitants of North America, American Indians, have endured and remain a vital cultural, political, social, and moral presence that has been an integral part of the American character. Tribal America has brought to this great country certain values and ideas that have become ingrained in the American spirit. The knowledge that humans can thrive and prosper without destroying the natural environment, the understanding that people from very different backgrounds, cultures, religions, and traditions can come together to build a great country, and the awareness that diversity can be a source of strength rather than division have played a unique and distinguished role in our nation's history and culture through vital contributions to government, medicine, education, religion, architecture, environment, and military. And whereas National American Indian Heritage Month is celebrated to recognize and promote awareness of the intertribal cultures and to educate the public about the heritage, history, art, and traditions of the American Indian people. And whereas we celebrate the American Indian Heritage Month while we take note of the injustices that have been suffered by American Indian people. Even today, few enjoy the full bounty of America's prosperity. Even as we look to the past, we must also look to the future. Along with other Americans, American Indians and Alaskan Natives will face new challenges in the coming century. We can ill afford to leave any of our people behind. Tribal America must figure as prominently in our future as in our past. And whereas the city of Montrose recognized its longest continuous residents, Uncompahgre Ute, the Southern Ute tribe, and the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, as well as other tribal nations and Alaskan Natives, and whereas the city of Montrose honors the contributions of the American Indian people and encourages its citizens to actively seek knowledge about the history and heritage of the American Indian people. Now, therefore, I, Dave Bowman, and the City Council of the City of Montrose, Colorado, do hereby proclaim November 2019 as American Indian Heritage Month in the City of Montrose, Colorado, in recognition of the heritage, history, art, and traditions of American Indian people, and encourage citizens to commemorate those contributions with appropriate programs and activities. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the affixed, the official seal of the City of Montrose this 12th day of November 2019. CJ, if you'd come up and receive this, please. Okay. All right, back to business. Call for public comment for non-agenda items. Is there, let me read one thing and then you may come up and speak. The call for public comment agenda item is a time where concerned members of the community may publicly voice their concerns and discuss items of interest. Please note that no formal action will be taken on the matters raised during this time. Individuals wishing to speak will be recognized by the chair, invited to the podium, asked to state their name and address, and will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments made during this time should be addressed to the council and pertain to matters of at least general interest to the city and its operations. Please be aware that neither the city council nor city staff are expected to respond or engage in discussion or debate, personal attacks and disagreements, personal and employment matters. The use of profanity or ethnic, racial, or gender-oriented slurs are prohibited, as is any disorderly conduct which violates state or local law and shall not be permitted. If an individual disregards these rules, they will be asked to leave the council chambers. Please.
Good morning. My name is Tammy Zamoyski with the Montrose Area Bicycle Alliance, and I just quickly want to thank the City of Montrose, the Public Works Department, and the Planning Department for the recent efforts to make our streets safer for everybody. The new bike lanes on South Nevada are wonderful, and they provide and encourage a safe, active transportation option for everybody in our community. And I specifically want to thank Scott Murphy, Ryan Cushnan, and Gary Baker for making this project happen. And I have some little bike pins that I would like to present to them just to show my appreciation.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And moving on to approval of minutes. City Council consideration of the minutes of October 15, 2019, regular City Council meeting, and the October 22nd, 2019, special City Council meeting. Any questions on the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October 22, 2019.
No, that's all together.
And October 15th.
I'll second.
Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Number 10, Ordinance 2490, first reading. City Council consideration of Ordinance 2490 on first reading, an ordinance of the City of Montrose, Colorado, providing and appropriating funds for defraying the expenses and liabilities of the City of Montrose, Colorado during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020. And Shani Wittenberg, please.
Good morning, I guess. I always say good evening. So yes, this ordinance 2490 is before you today. It's an appropriating ordinance by fund. Our charter does not dictate that you all approve by detail, but by fund. So you will notice that I have added a public safety fund to that ordinance in the amount of $11,003,550. And I've adjusted the general fund just slightly because our original budget, we were going to use some reserves to fund some of the police function. So it's reduced just slightly. I think it's $42,000 to $23,961,771. Other than that, I think those are the only changes from the October 15th proposed budget that I gave you. So I have a presentation if you'd like me to go into it. It's kind of similar to what we're going to do on Thursday. Okay. So the 2020 proposed budget, and I cannot see those numbers, but you probably can because your monitor is closer. This is basically a slide that shows kind of historically what we have spent personnel-wise, non-personnel-wise, and capital. I did change this slide from last year's budget presentation for 2019 to take out the transfers. Transfers just make our budget larger, if that makes sense, such as the Montrose Recreation District tax that we collect. There's a revenue that comes into the general fund, and there's an expenditure that goes out of the general fund. So this eliminates those types of transactions. It also eliminates what we transfer from the general fund to the capital fund. So just to keep that in mind.
So those transfers are like net neutral. I mean, X comes in for the rec district sales tax, and that same amount goes out.
Correct. I included this slide. It talks about what our estimated beginning balances will be for 2020. Note that 2019 is not finished yet, so I don't have a solid number for beginning. But what we estimate it to be, what our budgeted revenues are going to be, and then our budgeted expenditures with a difference there in that far column. And it also shows that total appropriation matches the budget ordinance 2490. Fund definitions, I included it this year just to be a little clearer that the city does have multiple funds. We don't have just a pot of money that we can spend however we want. The general fund does do the general operations of the city. Special revenue funds are those funds such as grants, Or in our case, for 2020, I've added the Public Safety Fund as a special revenue fund because it has a dedicated funding source. And even in the ordinance, we talk about 43% of the general fund being dedicated to public safety. So it's actually considered a special revenue fund for the 2020 budget. The capital projects funds are separate just because of their nature. Debt service funds, we only have one this year, or in 2020. And then enterprise funds, those are funds that the charges that we charge, like water, for water usage, we use in the water system. So those are monies that we can't take and allocate then to something different, like a street. They have to go to the function that they're collected for. Internal service funds are those funds that we have internally, such as the fleet fund. So we purchase our vehicles, they then get transferred as an asset to the internal service fund, who collects a lease payment for however many years. We just, however many we come up with, 3, 5, 7. And then when it's time for that to be replaced, it comes out of that separate fund. So the general fund or the enterprise fund isn't funding that non-regular expense at an awkward time. And then permanent funds, we only have one of those, and that is the Demeret Trust Fund. So just a little preview on governmental funds. The general fund is the main one, 8 special revenue funds, 1 debt service fund, 2 permanent funds, and 3 capital projects funds. This slide I changed it just slightly. It used to just be general fund and how we split between public safety, public works, and general fund administration. I just added the general fund and public safety fund to this slide. So you can see there where 44% of the 2020 budget is really allocated to, of general fund monies is allocated to public safety. That's that $8 million transfer that we will make from the general fund to the special revenue fund for public safety.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Sure.
Just for clarification?
Sure.
So the Public Safety Fund is a new fund,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be comprised of a transfer from the general fund operating money. And next year, for 2020, that's $8 million and represents 44%.
Correct.
And the new money coming in will also come into that public safety fund.
Correct.
And those two pieces together
Mm-hmm.
will obviously be more than just 8 million, and that will fund
Correct.
public safety. Okay.
Correct. I believe that total, I have it right here. It is 11 million. Thought I had it right on top.
11,003,500.
Okay. The revenue is $11,475,670. Of that, we have proposed that we spend $11,003,550, leaving $472,000 in that fund as the first year is always hard to know exactly how much you're going to be able to, in our case, hire new police officers. So that's just there. It'll just stay in that fund and build that reserve for when we do our capital expense of a building and those types of things.
So help me, I tried to follow, but the 11 million is the projected income from the new tax?
No.
Or that's the total of both numbers?
That's the total of both numbers.
I see, okay,
The
thank you.
projection for the new tax is $3,453,198.
Oh, okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
When we did the budget at the pavilion on October 3rd, all the funds that go into, at that point, public safety were like $8.8 million. Like, where's this other $800,000 going?
So that, when we anticipated a tax being passed, we kind of met as a staff and decided that the best thing to do at that point was to take that additional and just put it in the capital fund. The capital fund, we can fund, like I said, any capital. It's got the TIF funds in it for the downtown, and then it can also just carry over for street improvements year to year.
Guys, I've got a little bit of a problem with this. I was the one that stood up and said to the community, we weren't going to move money around if we passed 2A. And right now, I feel like we passed 2A and we're moving money around. And a part of this is my personal integrity. I stood up there and said that we were not going to play bait and switch. And right now, moving money that had been designated for specific items into, I won't call it a slush fund, but a fund that is undetermined, just doesn't seem right.
All along, what went to the voters was we would match the 2008 expenditures, which was the 43% of the general operating. So that's what we've done.
Right, so we're still spending that 43% out of general fund. We're not reducing that at all.
I'm not saying we're reducing it, but we're taking $800,000 that was originally going to be spent on specific things, and we're moving it into an undesignated fund balance, basically.
But this proposed budget was always, if the tax didn't pass, were we going to put in more money to public safety? And so, but
I never felt we really had a Plan A and a Plan B.
we specifically talked about, that's why we put the meeting off a week, so that Shaney could refigure the numbers for us.
And we've talked from the beginning that the ballot language would read the 43%, and actually this data shows us that we're doing 44%.
It was never less than. We've always said it could be more than 4. And we've never said it was going to stay at just 43%.
Right, but
We
for
said
example,
it would never go below that.
you proposed taking $75,000 out of council's budget. We talked about spending on some downtown capital improvements, and you said we should get a records tech for the police department. And so that money got moved to do a records tech in case the police tax didn't pass. We'd get that records tech one way or the other. Well, the police tax passed, so we don't need to take that $75,000 from the council budget. We can put it into capital reserves and spend it on downtown improvements again. So there were always the 2020 proposed budget. I mean, that's why we didn't just vote on it last week.
Well, I thought we didn't vote on it last week because we didn't want to have a meeting on the night of the election.
But we talked about the numbers and Shaney getting and giving us new information on Wednesday morning.
I understand that, but I would like to me, I'd like to know more specifically what we're going to do with that money. Now that we have $800,000 that we didn't anticipate, I think we should be more responsible than just saying, we're going to set it aside, we'll figure it out later. I mean, that's the criticism that we heard time and time and time again from the community was the accusation of just moving money and spending it without being totally transparent. And at this point, we're taking the first step down that road.
If I may, the capital improvement fund actually is where we're funding all of our street improvements from. And last I understood, we've got like a $40 million deficit there. So I don't really feel like moving money to the capital fund is a bait and switch. It's actually going towards another very vital part of our community, which is streets.
I'm not going to argue with that. I agree totally. But I stood up there and everybody agreed we're not going to move money from the police department to the road department. And what I hear you saying is that's exactly what we're doing.
If you look at 2019's budget and you look at the 2020 budget that we will vote on and potentially pass, there is nothing. There is a change from what we talked about a month ago when we were planning for what if this doesn't pass. How do we tell the community we didn't do anything different from normal? So we threw some stuff, we took money out of council budget, we took money out of our savings account and put it towards some things that would in no way be what we normally would have done.
Well, I don't agree with that, but okay.
I mean, that's exactly what the five of us sat there and talked about. You guys chime, you're nodding your heads. I mean, that's exactly what we talked about.
Yeah, you're explaining it better than I could, but I agree. I mean, that's my understanding as well.
But you weren't there.
I was there earlier for the preliminary discussions, and I saw the results of the discussions, so I'm sorry. I
Okay, but
wasn't
you
there.
weren't there at the October 3rd meeting.
No, I wasn't.
Well, I think I see where Dave is coming from, and I think we've got to be very careful with that, because we stood right up there and specifically said there would not ever be less than 43% in anything that we budgeted for, we put into that money that was going to be used for the police department. So I think it's a difficult decision to have to deal with. But I do have some doubts in that respect.
But we're putting 44% in.
Yeah.
Right. But we specifically said nothing less than 43, which indicates to me if we come in over that, we're still going to use it.
Yeah, I'd like the opportunity to sit down and go through the line item budget again and see what's being moved around and begin to talk about what our priorities are as far as using that extra money.
When you say that extra money, do you mean the new revenue from the tax that's coming in?
I'm talking about the difference of $800,000.
So money that 2 months ago would have been used in our cap fund for streets and stuff, that a month ago we moved into police, that passed, so we put it back into streets, but you're saying, no, you don't, that doesn't make sense.
Well, I think if we're going to put it back into streets, then we need to have a more itemized budget list other than we're just going to move $800,000. We'll figure out later what we're going to do with it.
So if I can just chime in, so I think there's miscommunication on what exactly has happened. So Shaney was just describing streets as one of the eligible expenses out of our capital fund. So nothing's been re-earmarked or classified as street projects. So the only change that has taken place is we met when we had our preliminary budget discussions with department heads and then council at the retreat. We were asked to do two budgets. We were asked to do a what if the tax doesn't pass budget, which is what we talked about at our budget retreat with city council and department heads. And that's the one that had about $800,000 of new monies going to the police department in 2020 because there was no other revenue source to do it. So that was our worst case scenario budget. What if the tax doesn't pass? We were also to have a backup plan. What if it does pass? And so rather than get into redesigning the entire budget for 2020, all Shaney and Blaine and I did after the tax passed was make sure that we looked through all the line items and what was coming from the general fund to the police department and make sure all that money was included and we didn't miss anything to accommodate the 43 minimum. But what we actually added up to was more closer to 44%. And that's why the transfer from the general fund to the new special revenue public safety fund is approximately the 44%. That difference of approximately 800 that the mayor's referring to, all we did was take the easiest route to get us to this meeting today for discussion, and this is first reading and we're supposed to discuss all the things you're talking about, is we dropped it into the capital fund rather than put it back into our undesignated fund balance, our reserve. And the reason we did that, we had the two choices. We could drop it back into reserve or we could put it in the capital fund, is the capital fund carries over from year to year, so it has its own fund balance that moves forward and is less of a slush fund like you were referring to than our general undesignated fund balance, which really is just a general non-earmarked fund, to allow for the discussion to take place with council on how you might want to use that moving through the year, and that discussion can take place today on first reading. You know, there was the downtown charging station discussion, there was discussion about playgrounds at the Parks Committee and those types of things that didn't really make it into our final draft of the budget prior to the tax because we had to use all those extra monies for public safety. And so the goal was to get us to today. We just dropped it in the capital fund rather than put it into reserve so we could talk about those extra projects. What Shane mentioned earlier I think is an important point. Council doesn't approve the city budget on a line item basis. Council approves it per charter on a fund basis. So the total fund, not the line items, but that doesn't mean we don't all talk about it and make sure we're on the same page moving forward as far as line items. So if there's questions about, we didn't really have any specific items when we dropped into that capital fund. So,
Aware of that.
so if there's discussion from council members today that you want to make decisions between first and second reading, you'd like us to amend some of our worksheets and the details, we can definitely do that. Or at a future meeting, because everything that's put into that capital fund would have to come before city council if it's over $50,000 project or something really out of the ordinary. It's not a minor little thing, which most capital projects cost more than $50,000 nowadays. So that would come up for a council discussion at that time in that meeting. So I think then that's where that transparency piece would come in. And then the third option that's sitting out there is keep that $800,000 in the police department budget. According to Blaine and Shaney and I, that's going to be, we're already, based on the anticipated revenues coming in from the public safety sales tax, that's going to create a reserve. This would just be adding to that reserve because we don't need that amount of money for 2020.
Wouldn't another option be to put that money back in A, the general fund where most of it came from, and B, well, the council fund, which is not a separate fund specifically, is it?
The council doesn't have a fund. It's
Right.
just a department under the general
It's a
fund.
department under the general fund.
So it'd be
Because
dropping it back into the general
it'd be
fund,
dropping it back
undesignated
as
fund balance.
undesignated into the general fund, which is where it got pulled out of in that October meeting.
Yeah, that's one of the options.
Well, what,
But that's what happened. So it's not a bait and switch. There's no
I
secret
I would be
projects.
much more comfortable leaving that 800,000 in the public safety fund. And if that means that if we can hold it, if there's a overrun on construction costs, we've got a little bit of a budget or a cushion there. I would rather see it stay, though, I mean, worst comes to worst, that's almost a year payment on the debt, correct? 800,000, the debt is like 900,000. That actually means we could take that money and pay the police station off 1 year earlier.
or it would also give us maybe a little coverage if we have a bad economy and we start coming up short on some of this too.
It doesn't give us nearly as much coverage as if we leave it in the general fund. If we move that money to the public safety fund, it can only be spent for public safety. And so if we want to use it in case of the economy downturn, or we can use it for anything, I mean, provided the council approves it, it can be used for more things by keeping it in the general fund or the capital fund than moving it to the public safety fund. And that was moved, I just feel like we had the regular amount of increase budgeted to public safety, and then we threw more money at public safety in a kind of, what if this doesn't pass? We need to throw more money at public safety. We need that records tech, even if it doesn't pass. So we found money other places. And to me, it's just, the public safety tax did pass, so we can put that money back for what it was originally designated for, either in the capital fund or in the general fund.
Yeah, makes good sense to me.
Can I make one clarification? It's 670,000 is what was moved to the capital improvement fund, because the original proposed budget was not balanced with revenues and expenditures. We were going to use some reserves, so just as a clarification piece. So I reduced that. The general fund now balances revenues to expenditures, and 670,194 was moved to capital.
So not 800,000.
Correct.
Because we were pulling money out of reserves to put towards public safety,
Correct.
and now we wouldn't pull money out of reserves for that. I mean, that's the idea is.
Correct. That's the direction I went, yes.
So is it correct, if you put that 670,000 into the general fund, it can be pulled out to go for whatever? It could go for capital improvements, it could go for public safety if needed, it could be for those various things. If we stick it in capital improvements, then it has to be a capital improvement.
Yeah.
With
Yes,
far
and
more
we thought that
flexibility.
would be a compromise in the middle rather than throwing it into some fund that could be used for any purpose. We know that there's a huge capital need in the community, and that it would be more palatable to put it into the capital fund rather than general undesignated fund balance. And that was my recommendation. just to try to have some compromise in the middle on the expectation of the community. It limits our hands as a city a little bit, rather than putting it somewhere there's no limits.
And it's not that we're robbing public safety. We're not taking it away. They're still getting all of the money that we thought from the beginning, correct?
They're getting what the ordinance,
Right, what the ordinance asked for.
But even, let's just take a specific example. We talked about officers and carrying their own rifles. What would it take to completely, or how quickly will that practice end? Now that 2A is passed, how quickly can we get the necessary firepower for the police? Because that's not something we have to go interview for. We can go out and buy it today.
Can I make a comment on that? Actually, the commanders and I had a budget discussion this morning, and that will be fixed January 1st. And that's with the discussion that we already had with the finance director and the city manager. We will have the funds available to fix that issue.
Okay, and that will be, where's that money coming from? From the new sales tax or money that's already in the budget?
That will be actually, I think, both sides of the house, because we had initially budgeted, if I remember right, in the council discussions for 5, and then the additional will come from the public safety sales tax. So that's important. It's a good point, and we will address it January 1st.
Good, okay. And I get, my pleasure would be that we can vote on this today at the next work session. I'd like to see a list of possible capital projects that we know need to be done and we now know that we have money for. And that way we can tell the community exactly where that money, I mean, I really think that we need to be very, very plain and transparent. 58 votes is not very many. And I think that whether we like it or not, part of the message was there's some mistrust in the community for the council, for the mayor, for city staff, and I think we need to do everything we can to combat that perception. I think we are responsible, we do a good job, but there's a perception out there that we need to start working on.
And it doesn't change anything. I mean, everything that gets spent is budgeted, is approved by city council, and items that are budgeted and cost more than $50,000 are approved a second time by council. So, you know, to characterize it as anything other is not fair to the process.
I think we just have to be very clear, because of some of the conversations I had with people who voted against 2A, a lot of it, there were several of them who are ex-police, law enforcement of one kind or another, who kept going on, and they were against it because typically the government starts just shuttling money back and forth and nobody ever really knows where it's going. So I think if we're going to do that, we have to be extremely careful how we do it and make darn sure it's the clarity of what we're doing is there. That was also one of the criticisms that I got in talking with people, the little blue booklet that came out with your voter information. Some people didn't always understand the way that last sentence, I think it was in the second paragraph, was written. Many people misinterpreted that. So I think we have to be very careful. I know there are certain legal requirements we have to meet, but I think we have to make certain we look at it and make it clear enough that the general public totally understands what we're up to.
Yeah, and we 100% agree with that, and it was brought up about reporting in our conversations, and I think it's important to highlight that. One advantage to having it set up as a public safety special revenue fund is that there will be clear paper trail of where money is going in and out of that fund. And so everything public safety related, not just law enforcement, because it includes code enforcement and animal control, everything public safety will be spent out of the one fund, and we'll have a really clear, transparent paper trail showing a transfer from our general fund monies to that fund, and then we'll be able to show how much came in from the special tax as well. And we plan on reporting that to City Council as often as you would like. Our normal process is to do a quarterly report to the city council at the public council meeting. So it's on TV, it's put on the channel 191 and everything for people, and it's on the website. So everybody can see that, just like we can see our retail sales enhancement monies, our tourism promotion, lodging tax, and those types of things. So any ideas you have on how to make those reports more transparent or more legible for the average citizen, we're totally open to all that. We want it to be as transparent as possible as well, because a lot of that criticism is based on the city as a whole. And when we're talking about financial procedures and processes, we're talking about Shaney and I and our staff, as well as city council. So we're all on that same team, and we want to show that we're all on the up and up. I think we can definitely agree on that.
I think creating a public safety fund was a really good way to handle it. I know you had some different options you were considering, and I really think it is absolutely the most easy to understand, because you see two sources of income that straight off on January 1st, 44%, just straight over from the general fund. And then every quarter we'll see the sales tax revenue specifically that's going into that. And I think it'll be really clear. And I just think that's going to be really easy for us to understand, and I think it's going to be really easy for the public to understand.
And just for clarification on that, so it doesn't sound like we're going to transfer $8 million January 1st, is it a monthly transfer?
Fair enough, because it hasn't come in yet, so thank you.
Is it monthly or
Shane's like, yeah, we don't have it all right on the January 1st.
Our plan was to do it monthly.
Thank you. That is a great clarification, because we don't collect all the sales tax on January 1st for the year, of course.
And we'll start seeing the new monies from the new tax come in mid-February, I think, after 1 month of collection. So everything's in arrears a little bit.
Any other comments from council right now? If not, I will open up a hearing. Anybody in the audience that would like to speak?
Dave Stockton, 3009 Cook Drive. As all you are aware, I was on the Public Safety Advisory Committee. I was also on the 2A committee to get this passed, the new tax. And I went to the budget retreat in October. And Mayor Bowman, I understand your concern about the perception of a bait and switch, but I don't see it that way personally. I agree with Mr. Bell that you had Plan A, Plan B, and you had the extra $800,000 put aside in the event the tax didn't pass. Now that it did, I think it's more prudent, as proposed, to go ahead and transfer that money back to the general fund, particularly since, as my understanding, the budget's never been approved in its entirety anyway. So I think we're safe, and I don't think you're doing a discredit to the public by moving this money back. Just my point of view. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from council? I'd entertain a motion.
Close the hearing.
Oh, hearing closed. Thank you.
No gavel today.
It's-
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to pass ordinance 2490 on first reading.
I second.
Please vote. And that passes unanimously. And number 11, Resolution 2019-25, City Council consideration of Resolution 2019-25, a resolution authorizing the filing of a 1306 Brownfields Cleanup Grant Program application, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Black Mountain Capital LLC to prepare the grant application and carry out the administrative duties upon the grant award, and authorizing the city manager to execute the grant contract with the Colorado Department of Health and Environment and city staff to act on behalf of the grant award. And Kendall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. Before you today is a resolution authorizing the filing of a grant application, the 1306 grant, with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment on behalf of Black Mountain Capital, and an amount up to $250,000. The 1306 program is a state program which provides funding to remediate contaminated sites that are not served by other grant programs through the state or the federal government. The program has assisted many local governments with cleaning up contaminated sites into better uses that provide and generate local revenues. Black Mountain Capital desires to purchase property and apply for the 1306 program, but they are an ineligible applicant on their own. The address of the subject project property has been withheld due to the nature of the environmental conditions and a pending property transaction. The City of Montrose is an eligible applicant and has an interest in seeing the subject property revitalized. The resolution before you today authorizes the filing of the grant application, the mayor to execute an agreement with Black Mountain Capital to prepare the grant application and to complete the administrative duties following a successful grant award, authorizes the city manager to execute a grant contract with CDPHE upon a successful grant award. It should also be noted that if the property transaction does not go through, the project will not proceed. This information will also be transparent in our grant application, and CDPHE is aware of this. Prior to submitting the grant application, the city will competitively bid the project to have an accurate cost estimate, and the contractor will be selected contingent upon a successful grant award. Other than administrative time, the City of Montrose bears no cost or expenses towards this grant. Colleen Aller is here today representing Black Mountain Capital. I can answer questions as well as Colleen. Thank you.
Question I have, Kendall. A lot of people may not understand what the Brownfield grant application actually is. Could you describe what Brownfields is?
So a brownfield is an underutilized property that may have the perception of being contaminated. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is, it's just the perception. So the subject property that we are applying for under this program has already been assessed under a previous grant that we actually have right now, the US EPA Brownfields grant. We've completed a phase 1 on that property, and we are currently completing a phase 2. A phase 1 environmental review of a brownfield looks at the historical records to see what was on that property and to determine if there could be any contaminated concerns. A phase 2 is more in depth, where they actually do soil testings and samplings to see what actually is there. So that's a big answer, but it's basically an underutilized property that has the potential for being contaminated, but also has the potential for being redeveloped and being an economic generator. So examples of some of the past projects, I believe the potato grower site, we completed a phase 1 environmental on that. Everything came back great. That property was able to move forward, and now you have the distillery there on that property. And so that's the point of the US EPA Brownfields program, is to assess these properties and get them back into to the economy, generating revenues for the local economy.
And the city isn't putting in any hard money, but your time to help with the grant, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the city gets a copy of the report?
Yes, we own the reports to the US EPA phase 1 and phase 2 reports.
So so the proposed, if they want to buy this and then they decide not to for another reason, we have those reports for another buyer may come along.
That's correct. We have those reports are actually public, yes.
Okay.
So yeah.
So it gets done regardless of who the potential buyer is.
Yeah,
It gets done, and then we all know more about that piece of property.
Yes, concerning the phase 2, as far as with this program before you today, the 1306 grant application, if Black Mountain Capital, if there were any problems with the transaction, not saying that there would be, and it were to not go through, then we would not move forward with this cleanup project, because it would be very costly and the city wouldn't pay for that, or wouldn't move forward with it. Because you would have to have a willing property buyer as well.
Okay,
Property owner, I should say.
thank you.
At any point, is the city responsible for cleaning up the building?
No,
Okay.
they're not.
All right. Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, any more from council?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2019-25 as presented.
I'll second that.
Go ahead and vote. And that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 12, Uncompahgre River Temperature and Flow Data Collection System Design. City Council consideration of an agreement with Wright Water Engineers for the design of the Uncompahgre River Temperature and Flow Data System in an amount not to exceed $50,000. And David Breeze, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this is an item that was discussed about a month ago at a work session. This is in response to our new NPDES permit at the wastewater treatment plant, which requires us to collect continuous temperature data on the river that we discharge to. So as part of the process, we went out for RFPs, and we didn't get any proposals due to the specialized nature of the project and fairly tight time frame that we're on. So we reached out to Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association and found out contractors or consultants that would do this type of work and reached out to them specifically to have them submit a proposal. We got 2 proposals in. One was from Wright Water Engineers, the other was from Colorado Water and Civil Contractors. We reviewed those proposals. The one from Wright Water had much more detail and was much more specific on and matched what we were looking for in our proposal, in our RFP for the work. The one from Colorado Water and Civil Contractors was pretty vague and was more of proposing to do a design build process, and a lot of information we'd find that out during that process, whereas the Wright Water was, here is what the cost of designing this is. So after reviewing that with city staff, we felt much more confident that the best proposal was the Wright Water proposal and are bringing that forward for approval. With that, I'll have any questions.
David, could you please tell me what those initials NPDES stand for?
NPDES is National Pollution Elimination Discharge System.
Okay.
And it's an EPA terms for our permit for discharging the wastewater from the treatment plant back to the river.
Thank you.
David, about what kind of a temperature differential do we have in that discharge?
We really don't have any data on that, and that's part of the whole process. This process is establishing that data of what that temperature difference on the river versus our treatment is. Typically, treatment plants discharge a slightly higher temperature than the river. And from some of the environmental studies and stuff, there are certain fish species that are impacted by that temperature differential. And so part of this whole process is starting to capture that data so that then decisions can be made. And that's part of the reason why we've expanded this to not only the temperature, but looking at the flow relationship as well, because obviously the higher percentage of flow that we are to the river, the bigger impact that temperature difference makes, whereas the less, if we're a smaller percentage, then it makes less of an impact. And so we felt it was really valuable and imperative that we have both flow relationships and temperature relationships to where we can make sure that we are doing what is environmentally the right thing to do.
I think it's important to point out, too, that we have a deadline that's required by the federal government. Is that correct?
Right, the permit requires that we have this in place and operational by the end of March.
So it's important to have a contractor that not only knows what they're doing, but has a track record of having done this before. And so I think your choice is to at least reduce or eliminate the risk of missing this date, and then we get in other kinds of trouble, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, they did give us a very tight time frame. It does correspond with when flows are going to start increasing on the river, making it impossible to work on after that anyhow. So we are very tight time frame to get this designed, get all the permits that we need in place, whether there is any for, through the Corps of Engineers and stuff, and actually get these constructed before the irrigation system is turned on that increases the flows in the river.
Okay, thank you.
Will the public have access to the information, specifically being able to look at the flow rates on the river?
Yeah, all of the data will come in through our SCADA system and through our network. We'll make that out there to where it's public available, work with Scott and stuff to make sure that we've got that information out so that people can see what those flow rates are.
Any public comment? Seeing none, I take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve an agreement with Wright Water Engineers for the design of the Uncompadre River temperature and flow data system in the amount not to exceed $50,000.
I'll second it.
Please vote. And that passes unanimously. And staff reports? Mr. Bell.
I don't have anything at this time, unless you have specific questions for me.
There's a lot of holiday events, but maybe next week at our evening meeting, and could go over those again for our.
Yeah, we were recently on the radio show talking about holiday events. Alexis came with us, and we'd be happy to do that again. I can highlight some of them if you want now.
No, we meet again in a week, and I think that will be better timing.
Sure.
Why do I think we're all confused? Because it's noon on a Tuesday.
We're used to having a work session,
on like
which
a
is a different
second week of
format
the
altogether.
month, it's just terribly discombobulating.
Mr. Glassbell.
I have nothing.
Well, I have something. We had our first youth city council meeting last week, and a great group of young people. And so the first representative will be here at our next city council meeting. So I'm excited that we're getting underway, and it's going to be a great year, I think.
All right, Barbara?
I will be attending the Colorado Municipal League Mayor's Summit in Denver this Friday, and the agenda 8 to 5 looks chock full of some really good topics. So I hope to bring back some good information and also to share what we're doing here in Montrose with other mayors and mayor pro tems across the state.
All right, I've got several things. I think the first thing I want to mention is we have a budget meeting for the community to come learn more about our budget on Thursday, 4 o'clock right here. Should end by 6 o'clock. So I know there's been lots and lots of discussion about our budget and the budget process. I would invite everybody that even thought they had a question about it, please come to that meeting on Thursday, the 4th. Our budget is very open, very transparent, and I know that between council and staff, every penny can be explained. So if you have any questions, that's the time to come and talk to us. We look forward to that. And then Friday is Crab Crack, a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club, and also at 6 o'clock at Montrose High School Football Stadium. We will be, the Montrose High School football team, ranked 3rd or 4th in the state at this point, will be taking on Brighton at 6 o'clock as part of the playoff system, and as long as they keep winning, they'll keep going, and we hope to see them at Mile High on December 7th. So you can sort of pay attention to all the football news. The volleyball team is in Denver. I want to say they start at the Springs and then go to the Coliseum. Is that
It's set up for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I'm hoping if they play Thursday night to catch them. But
cool? So lots of stuff going on with our kiddos at Montrose High School. The other thing I would like to talk about is, first, thank you, community, for passing 2A. We've all worked very, very hard, and really that was the easy part. Now really becomes the hard part, putting all the money together, putting the figures together, getting the people hired, building a building. But I want to thank first the Blue Ribbon Committee that came up with the recommendations. Thank you so much for the time and effort that you put into that to create a better Montrose. I want to thank David and Phoebe, David Reed and Phoebe Benziger, and everybody that was on the committee to pass 2A. You guys did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. I particularly want to accolade Chief Hall. You put hours and hours of your own personal time into this. We can't begin to thank you enough. But thanks, everybody. I don't care which way you voted. Thanks for getting out, for voting, to asking good questions. You make us better. And in response to passing 2A, it would be my recommendation that on some kind of regular basis, whether we do it once a year or twice a year, I'd like to see us put out a 2A report card. Not focusing on the money so much, but I thought one of the beauties and one of the reasons we were able to pass 2A was we gave a very clear message. And it came from the committee, the Blue Ribbon Committee. It came from Chief Hall, City Manager Bill Bell, from Cheney. Here's what we're going to buy. We said very specifically, 14 officers, 6 civilians, and we said how we were going to spread that out. I would like to see us come up with a report card saying, at this point, here's how many resource officers we've hired. Here's how many traffic control officers we've hired. Go through the list of what we said we would do, and when it's done, check it off. We've accomplished that. And then also to continually tell the community where our response times are, how many crimes are being committed. There was one other big thing, response time and crime reduction. There was still, I'm thinking something else. But we can take those things that we said based on data are a problem and show through data what we've done to correct them. And I think that could be a really meaningful, we could mail it out in the water bill to show the community we said this is what we're going to do and this is how we've accomplished it. And we could even begin to talk about money collected to build the building, give a regular briefing on what's going on with building the new police buildings, and really tell our community, show them, we said we were going to do this, and look what we've done so far. And I would suggest to council, to staff, that at the next work session, we have a discussion around this. And in my opinion, this would be a great way to say, without getting into the weeds of the budget, we said we were going to hire this many people, and here's where we are. And with that, I'm done. You look.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, sir. We'll see you in a week.
Yeah, it'll feel like time will fly. Next thing you know, we'll be back.
Yeah, totally discombobulated.